Hey guys, Steve Moran here. I am at Long-Term Care 100 with Peter Murphy-Lewis. I've been looking forward to this. He's probably the most creative video guy in the senior living space right now. He has these channels, People Worth Caring About, in senior living and skilled nursing. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. You should be looking at it online. And so we're going to do something very different here. He goes in and he does storytelling with a resident. I'm old. I'm not quite ready to be in senior living yet, but I'm going to let him do his curiosity thing with me. And then we'll talk a little bit about what he's doing.
Wonderful. I'm excited to be here. Anyone who's worked with me knows that I'm not traditionally trained as a storyteller, nor do I have anything ever scripted. So usually my first question it starts off with someone of an influence. And my question would be, what is the most unique influence in your approach to storytelling as a marketer, as a content guy, that we might not know from following your content?
So I'm going to start by saying that, and I've told this story a little bit before, but I almost didn't graduate from college because I just didn't know how to write. And I think the reason for that is that I grew up in an era where everybody was supposed to write right-handed, but I was left-handed. And so I was forced to write right-handed. I still write right-handed, although I play sports and everything left-handed, but my handwriting was unreadable. And so when and this is of course before we had word processors, as kids. And so everything I did was terrible. But I love to read and I love stories. And as a kid, I'd read, 40, 50 books a year. I love stories. I love hearing the oral stories. And I just became fascinated by stories. And then I started realizing that I had some gifts to tell stories. And I worked on telling better stories. And so I love this kind of a format because, the interviews are sort of question and answer, but really they're, tell me a story. And we're going to get to your story.
Yeah. Is there a particular moment when you either started to realize that you loved it or that you were good at it?
So I had, I was probably in my 30s when I realized I had some writing gifts. I sat down and wrote something and I submitted it to a church publication. And it was a big, actually, international publication for the denomination, and they accepted it. Now, I will tell you that when it came out, it didn't look very much like what I wrote. It was heavily, heavily edited. I don't know what they would do with my writing today very early on. And then I just discovered as I was writing stuff, it resonated with people. And I still don't think of myself as a writer, even though that's really how I've written, 4,000 or 5,000 pieces, done 1,000 video. I don't really think of myself as a video person either.
Would you say that your struggle with writing, because of the way that they trained you, is a weakness that ended up being a strength for you?
Yeah, I think probably so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that I can relate to that because I was very dyslexic as a kid and also bad at reading and writing comprehension. And I think that impacts my vocabulary. So that's a weakness for me as a public speaker. But when I'm doing a story, it comes off as kind of simple or almost a little bit ignorant. And that vulnerability makes people trust me more. And it's just that I'm not good at language.
Okay. So I like that. And I think that, one of the things that I've discovered is I'm very imperfect. And I used to be bothered by that. And now I spend a lot of time talking about the struggles and challenges. And I find that when I do that, that's actually the stuff that resonates with people because, we're here at this conference and this isn't a slam at the conference. I see it at Nick. I see it at every conference I go to, right? You look at, we see there are 500 people here, perfect people, perfect lives. They don't have any struggles, right? Mm-hmm. And when they're on the stage, they don't have any struggles. They've got this thing figured out they're talking about. But the truth is, the only people who don't have struggles are the people I don't know very well. Because everybody's got struggles.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you said that. I share that a lot on stage and actually takes away my nerves when I talk about my imperfections.
Yep.
And it kind of puts us on an even level. Steve, how long would you say that you have been 100% focused on senior living?
So I started had a friend when I was in my late 20s who bought a little 15-bed senior living community, and he started telling me how rich he was getting. And I ran the numbers, and I thought, oh, way to get rich. And so I'll be honest with you, when I first started into senior living, it was a very selfish motivation. I just thought I could get rich on it. I failed. Wrong motivation. But I really liked the business, went off and did some high-tech stuff for a while, and then ultimately came back to it. And along the way, I just realized that making a difference in people's life was really my crack. It's the stuff that I'm addicted to, makes me feel good. I know that, and I've learned I can make an impact on people's lives. I can do things, I can say things, we can have conversation, and it helps leaders be better leaders. I also teach 5th and 6th grade kids in my church, and that's a big part of my life. It makes a big difference in them. Work really hard to be good at it. So
you may have already answered this. I don't know if it's going to be tech or if it's going to be education, but had you not focused on senior living, what do you think would have been your path?
Oh man. So if I were going to go back and do my life, I'm not sure this exactly answers the question, but if I were going to go back and redo my life knowing what I know now, I'd probably go be a junior high school teacher.
Why junior? Why not sophomore? Why not senior?
Well, I think junior high school for a couple of reasons. One is they're still not growing up, and they're young enough to sort of not, they don't spend a lot of time pretending to be growing up, and they have a wonderful sense of humor, and you can have a profound impact on their lives. In my church group, I've been teaching kids for decades, mostly teenagers. So this is kind of a younger group, but I've been teaching them for the last 7 or 8 years. I've got 4 or 5 boys in my class right now who have very low impulse control. They are the toughest kids I've ever had to teach. I just get so frustrated. Sometimes like a moment I want to cry because I feel like I'm so incompetent about it. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is that I can have a bigger impact on those kids' lives than I can on the lives of the kids who grow up in these, they're high achieving families. They're driving. They're going to be, doctors and dentists and professors. Those kids are probably going to be fine anyway. These kids are really struggling to figure out their lives. I can change their lives. And so I love that.
Is there a common theme other than impacting people's lives between what you do in senior living and marketing and content and being an educator? Obviously, you already said impacting lives, but is there something else?
So yeah, I guess this is sort of confession time, right? So I like being on stage. I like being famous, and I don't always like myself for liking that very much because it sounds pretty selfish. Mm-hmm. So that's the common theme. I kind of think it is.
Being an educator of 5th grade and 6th grade isn't being famous. You're just important for them.
Well, I don't know. I'm famous for them. And within at least my church body, I also tell children's stories. And so everybody sort of look at that and they go, man, look at that old guy teaching those kids. He's really doing a cool job. I can't believe it. He's better at that than anybody else we've ever seen. So it sort of goes beyond. And there's this idea, right, that influence and authority are not the same thing. So I have authority because I'm the CEO, I am the elected official, I am, because the rule books say that. And if you have authority, that means you have some level of influence, but you can also have tremendous influence and be a nobody. Mm-hmm. And I guess I sort of think that's who I am in senior living, or at least even today, because I don't have any stature. I mean, I'm the kingdom of I'm the king of my own kingdom that I made, and I'm not really technically the king of it because now that Procare owns it, but I still lead this. And so the only thing I've really got is influence, and it feels good to have influence. It feels really good you're doing the same thing, right? People come to you and say, "Oh man, that video you made me cry." You made me laugh. It feels good, right?
What is your biggest, let's do professional accomplishment that everyone who knows you as an acquaintance or influencer might not be aware that's important to you? So important to you, not the accolades of what the industry thinks.
Yeah, that's a great question. what's important to me? I'll tell you what's important to me is getting a single email that says, that article, it got me to thinking. Or, that article you wrote, I shared that with my team because it was so impactful. The starfish story, everybody knows the starfish story. I think that mostly for me, my biggest opportunity is to change one life. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot about it in terms of, Abraham Lincoln was famous, right? He changed the world. He changed the United States. What's his mother's name? I don't know either. But you know what?
I was in her house 6 months ago. I should go.
Yeah. No. But the thing is, if his mom hadn't been there, there'd be no Abraham Lincoln, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe his father too. So, yeah.
The follow-up question around kind of accomplishment leads me, and I feel like you'll feel comfortable with this because you already talked about imperfection. What is one or two huge failures that you've shared and they are important for your success? You might still be embarrassed by them, but not so much that you're not aware that had you not had them, you wouldn't be who you are.
Sure. I'll give two easy ones. I was a senior living operator. I was telling you about my friend. I went out and built a little empire. At one point in time, I had 15 communities. And when I developed those, I believed that the way I would sell them would be to have create the most affordable, not very interesting buildings. And not unsurprisingly, the public didn't agree with that. And so we had a real hard time filling them. And ultimately, the whole thing collapsed. I did bankruptcy. Took me many, many years to talk about it. It's still painful to talk. I'm sort of comfortable talking about it, but it's still painful to talk about. But, I learned a lot of lessons from that. And the other thing is that very early on, I did not a keynote, but a breakout where I had a bunch of people. It was for a California assisted living trade show, and it was titled something like 6 Lessons I Learned from Touring Communities. And I'd been at a conference on the East Coast. I flew home. I reworked the whole talk. I walked up there and I had a huge crowd, and I was so excited about the size of the crowd. And I got up there and I started talking, and I just told the truth about how terrible most of my business were. And it was a very, very harsh talk. And if people had tomatoes to throw at me, they would have. I had people arguing back with me, and I got terrible speaker ratings, although there were a handful of people who loved it because, man, we need to hear that stuff. We need to hear the truth. And I walked away. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I didn't want to go to the dinner afterwards. It was one of the worst moments of my life. And what I learned, though, was that what I said was truth, but it was delivered in a way that it was so unpalatable that it didn't make a difference. Mm-hmm. And so I'm much more careful about how I write and create content as a critic, because I want to deliver it. I wrote about somebody got up and gave a presentation at a conference a few years ago that I was at, and it really bothered me because they talked like their organization did all this great stuff, and I knew the organization, and it didn't accurately reflect what they were doing at all. And I wrote about it several months after because I didn't want to embarrass anybody. I had several people come to me, man, you should have named that company. But I shouldn't have named that company. And the reason is that if I'd named that company, I would have made those people mad. It wouldn't have made them change. And it would have made other operators say, I don't know if I want to talk to Steve Moran because he might trash me in public. And we're not in the business of trashing people. We're in the business of lifting people up and making it better. Are there lots of problems in senior living that need to be fixed? Oh, yeah, no question about it. But we want to talk about those only in the context of solutions. And so both powerful learning moments. So,
who's the most influential person in your life that you've never met?
That I've never met. I'm going to start. I have to say Jesus to start with, right? But somebody who's still alive. Adam Grant, I guess technically, I actually have a little bit of an email relationship with him, but I've seen him on stage, but never met him in person. I'm a big fan of what Jensen Wang does at NVIDIA, just because he's built this amazing organization. Simon Sinek, yeah.
Yeah. Yesterday, you asked me who was the most interesting person at the party at LTC 100. Who's the most interesting person for you in senior living?
The most interesting person for me in senior living. Oh man, that is, you are one of those people because you're very creative and you think outside the box. I think that Sean Kelly at Front Porch is doing some really amazing work. I think P. Stubblefield, Lynn Katzman at Juniper is doing some amazing work. Bob Kramer, of course, has had this amazing influence on the industry. And I think the unsung heroes are really the residents. Jack Cumming, who lives in the senior living community, is 89, I think. I hope I get that right, Jack. He writes for us on a regular basis. He's so passionate about protecting the rights of the residents, and he sometimes, comes across very strong. I think people get uncomfortable with what he's saying, but he's really, he's saying, hey, we're paying all the bills. We should get, you should give us some more credit for what we're doing. We're the ones who made enough money to be able to afford your building. And so he's certainly somebody that I have tremendous respect for. So
what are the one or two ideas in AI that you think are going to be great for senior living, and one or two ideas that you're like, I'm not sure about that?
So I think the biggest thing for AI is that it is actually it can allow you to do deep research and play with ideas in all kinds of areas that you just couldn't do, or you'd have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on research. I use it a lot for just sort of having conversations of, I've got this idea that I want to write about. Help me think about what that means. I spend a lot of time with AI saying, tell me why I'm wrong. It's something most people don't do, and it can be pretty brutal because AI is normally designed to tell you how brilliant you are. I interviewed a guy by the name of Casey Jackson a couple of weeks ago who does motivational interviewing, and he made a statement that was really profound, and that's that AI is always going to be more empathetic than any human can ever be. And that's absolutely true, and it's really, really scary. And so we have to guard against that probably more than anything else. I think that I think people see AI as a shortcut, as an easy way out. So you go and say, well, go create a resume, go write a cover letter, go make an email. And they take it, they maybe get one read and send it out. That's a terrible use of AI. I do worry that AI right now makes me take longer to write content than it did before, because I'll write it, put it into AI, it'll come back, and I'll go back and forth 3 or 4 times. But I think it's got the capacity to make us lazy and not spending much time thinking. Read an article from Dan Pink, or a post from Dan Pink on LinkedIn this morning, and his challenge was to once a week book half an hour time to do deep concentration and just focus on one thing. I think we lose that with AI.
It's funny that you mentioned the concentration, because in the last year or two, I've realized that as technology and cell phones have, overtaken my life and many others' life, notifications and so forth, my highest level of concentration is only in 2 places. It's on airplanes when I don't want to pay for the Wi-Fi, or when I'm camping. I sleep in a hammock and there's no way to plug in anything, and I don't have any electronics.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. I do quite a bit of hiking and some backpacking, but even with that, I carry a lot of electronics, but only for like mapping and location and things. I just can't imagine like taking my cell phone, putting videos on, and it's laying in my camp. You got this beautiful outdoors that you can listen to and watch. So I hear that.
What's the favorite piece of content that you've written in your life as a writer that you're like, man, I did this, I'm proud of this?
So my favorite, I'll tell you a favorite, and it's sort of turned into a series. I've written a series of articles about being a caregiver for my stepfather. He's got dementia. He's living in a care home. I'm completely responsible for him. He doesn't have any biological children. And I, one of the early articles I wrote was titled, I think I Just Want to Cry. And I remember trying to figure out what to do, how to provide good care for him. I was just like, I need somebody to tell me what to do. And it was really hard because I'm an expert in senior living. That's what I thought. And then when you become a caregiver, you realize how much you don't know and how difficult it really is. And as I've written about my stepfather, I've gotten so many very, very kind emails from big leaders. I can't tell you who their names are. I got one from somebody who's just sort of this hard-charging money guy all the time. And, he said, what can I do for you? And it really touched my heart. And so I was really proud of that series. It's still something I'm writing about. I've got an article that I just wrote. I don't think we've published it yet. If I haven't finished, I'm not sure. Called I'm So Tired of Lying. So,
wow, that sounds, I look forward to that. You mentioning kind of the caretaker role made me think of something. I think I was probably 18 or 19 years old. My father told me, there's two things in life that are really, really hard, and we don't dedicate 1 hour of schooling to teach you how to do it, which is be married, be a good partner, and to raise a kid. He goes, I went to 25 years of education. No one taught me either one of those. I'm going to add the third one, taking care of your father or mother when they're passing or have memory issues, cognitive issues.
Yeah. Actually, so those are really important. I mean, I think you're right. We have lots of things we don't ever teach anybody. We sort of assume that people learn it from their parents, except that, and, I think it used to work okay when society was very homogenous. And, we lived in little villages and families were all kind of the same. I mean, they're probably not true for you because I was part of the last generation, but I grew up in a generation where, for the most part, moms didn't work, or if they worked part-times, and everybody had two parents, and their parents never got divorced. In fact, my parents did get divorced, and it was very scandalous back then because people just didn't do that. And of course, but now it's just, we got lots of, families look so different and in so many ways, and most families have to have both people working, and marriages are more complicated. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to turn the table, and we're going to talk about what Peter does. So tell me a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so 6 years ago, I became a CNA, and I realized if I wanted to make a difference in this industry, I had to take my experience from being in television. I've been a TV host in South America for about 10 years, and take my experience from storytelling on television and line that up with what caregivers do. And that was revolutionary for me. That's almost what I do 90% of all of my life, all year round, is do documentaries and storytelling in the senior living space.
Okay. And what makes your storytelling different?
I would say two things that I would probably stand out for it. The first one is kind of humility. My parents are very humble people. Although I have lots of education, almost finished my PhD, sold a company, entrepreneur. I approach every person I interview as knowing more and being more interesting than me, and that's genuine. That's from my parents. And then probably the second is curiosity. I can remember realizing at the age of like 30 or something that as I got older, the more questions I asked, the more stupid I looked. And we teach young people to ask questions, but around the age of 10 or 12, kids start to realize when you raise your hand and you ask questions, people make fun of you. As we get to become adults, even more so, we actually, as adults, we ask questions to show people we're smart, to embarrass them on stage, to embarrass them in a boardroom. And that never made sense to me. So my questions are very simple and very dumb. And I think that kind of honesty, people wish they didn't ask that embarrassing question. They wish they asked a question like me.
Okay. So it's interesting you say that, because I think that when I find I'm a pretty good listener. Although I've been doing most of the talking, I'm actually a pretty good listener. I'm a pretty good question asker. And I find pretty consistently that I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, that's a really good question. It's funny you say that because I sort of tend to think of people who ask good questions as being the smartest people in the room. So I've got to go back and rethink this. You help people tell their stories. You're part of the story. You're not just interviewing them. You're actually part of the story. Talk to me a little bit about how you figured that out, how that came about, and why that's so powerful.
Yeah, that's the first time I've been asked that question. So I think what's key there is everybody has a story, and most people aren't good at telling their story. They either give too many details or they don't give enough details. And then the more important you get, you're vague and you're not any vulnerable. But let's go to the average person. So either too many details or not enough. I interrupt using my curiosity so it comes off as kind and interested to guide the person with too many details to a different conversation, because their story if it's not interesting to me, it's not going to be interesting to people watching. Or if they didn't give enough details, my curiosity asks why and how. Why do you do what you do? Who's impactful for? So I just keep asking over and over another question, and I would say that's the difference.
So I love that, because as I was watching the videos you showed during your presentation yesterday and looking at what you're doing on social media, the thing that struck me was how you become a part of the story. And I agree with you. I think that I've done some resident interviews and they have beautiful stories. They're just mostly not very good at telling the story. So I love that. So talk to me a little bit about how you actually work with senior living organizations.
Yeah, so first started doing documentaries for state associations. We've done we have 6 seasons that we are in process of filming or producing for different associations. And then I started to have corporations, private companies, CEOs reach out and say, I want to be part of the storytelling process. So we filmed that in February, and we have another one coming up. And now I've actually started doing stories outside of the senior living space. I did one on a community banker. I did one on a zoo. It's the exact same process, not any different than a caregiver than it is with someone else. It's kind of, why do you do what you do every single day? Give too many questions. I ask you a question, it takes a different way.
Yeah, I love that so much. I'm bringing one of my team to the Senior Living Executive Conference in Nashville in a few weeks, and one of the things that I'm really focused on doing is some street interviews. One question, tell me about growing older. Tell me about what you think of what goes through your head when you think of senior living. I'd love to be able to do that with family members and caregivers. Is how has it changed your life, right? So what I hear in your storytelling is you're really having people talk about how senior living, that not always directly, but they're really talking about how senior living has transformed their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You yesterday in the screening, you said that there was a good question to follow up with. And I do use it. And you said, I think a second good question, other than why do you do what you do every single day, is how has it impacted your life? And that lands really well with somebody who has had a before and after and is vulnerable. So either they've gone through depression, or they've lost a child, or they've gone for a horrible divorce, or it's a man who's gone through midlife crisis and their kids won't talk to them. That person can identify it. The frontline caregiver who spent 20 or 30 years doing caregiving and doesn't know any different, it's so part of their DNA, they don't even understand the question. So I love the question for somebody you can tell is about ready to break and wants to tell you. But the person who's a soldier, wow, they're like, what do you mean?
Yeah. So this is really interesting. I know we're running out of time because I've got a live stream I got to jump on in about 4 minutes. But I think we ought to explore this, because you're doing an amazing job. So this is not critical at all. I just look at it and I think, what I'm struggling with is I want people to look at senior living, a job in senior living, and say, oh man, that would be so cool. Mm-hmm. I would love to be able to have that kind of an impact on people's lives. So I'll give you my best example. I look at NVIDIA, their stock prices have gone through the roof. They're producing these AI chips that are unrivaled in the world. And so if you were a software engineer or hardware engineer and you lived in Silicon Valley, and if you were to go to 100 software or hardware engineers in Silicon Valley and say, if there's one company that you wanted to work for, probably 95% of them would say, oh yeah, I want to go to NVIDIA, make lots of money, do really interesting things, changing the world, right? I want that for senior living. I want there to be some senior living companies out there where if you walk through this conference, you'd say, well, what's one skilled nursing organization that you would want? Like, if you could work for any place, who is it you'd want? There should be like one or two companies where everybody go, oh man, I want to go work for that. I wanna go. Yeah, I'll change the world. It'll change my life. That's my goal. And so,
love it.
And I think what you're doing with your storytelling is you're giving people the vehicle to do that, to see the joy, the way that you can change people's lives. I mean, how did you figure? Actually, one more question for you before we cut this off. How did you figure out that it was okay to film the really messy stuff where people are putting on gloves and handling fluids and all that kind of stuff?
I didn't know if it was going to work. I was a little bit nervous because in television, I did something similar to Dirty Jobs in Micro. So I did underwater welding. I cleaned a windshield. I cleaned a skyscraper in a one-man harness. Those things work visually. What you just mentioned, I didn't know if it was going to. But when I was in filming and I realized what I was feeling during the interview, then I knew that it would work on screen.
I love that. And it does work, right? Mm-hmm. And I guess when you think about it, because the thing that sort of, as you were talking about, and we were watching the scenes yesterday, one of the things that occurred to me is, people love hospital shows and they love it when they're showing it's all fake, right? Mm-hmm. But all the messy stuff going on. So it's sort of a natural extension that doing it for real would be better.
There was a clip yesterday where I was in Albuquerque and I was talking to a gentleman who made a joke about being 102 years old. And I said that he looked young. And there's a moment where I said, your room is really well taken care of. And he interrupts me and he says, yeah, it's my home.
That's right.
Did you hear the gasp in the room? They're like, oh, wow, that's true, right?
Yeah.
And it's because I treat it as home as a room. And that is the most viral post I've ever had on LinkedIn, which is where he stopped him in my tracks and he corrected the way that I was talking about his home. And that is an example where I knew that I felt in that moment that I had disrespected him filming, and I knew that that was going to work. Yeah. Because my heart was embarrassed, my gut was embarrassed, and I knew that is okay. It's okay if I'm wrong, put it on camera.
Yeah, that was a beautiful, beautiful moment. It really hit home for me. This is great. Well, we've talked for 40 minutes. We'll probably use 2 minutes. Well, you know what it's like, right? You make films. So, but this has been outstanding. I wish you were going to be in Nashville. It'd be really fun to go out on the street and do some videotaping with you.
That
would be fun.
Do that.